In 1935, fascist leader and de facto dictator of Italy, Benito Mussolini, will launch an international crisis that will not only outrage the world, but also show that by now, national chauvinism is not just a trend, but an unstoppable force. He does this by invading Abyssinia and ousting its indigenous dictator, Emperor Haile Selassie. Welcome to Between Two Wars, a chronological summary of the interwar years, covering all facets of life, the uncertainty, hedonism, and euphoria, and ultimately humanity's descent into the darkness of the Second World War. I'm Indy Neidell. A crucial part of fascism is that the nation should be as strong and as big as it possibly can, right? So when Italy becomes fascist under Benito Mussolini in the 1920s, the Italians again look out across their borders. Like other European powers, Italy had participated in the scramble for Africa in the late 19th century, Italian Eritrea and Italian Somaliland becoming part of the Italian Empire in the 1880s. Now in the 1930s, Italy has also colonized Libya. One of the major African countries that managed to survive the 19th century and until the 30s uncolonized, though, is Abyssinia, today Ethiopia, between Eritrea and Somaliland. This area is desirable, having influence over the Suez Canal. It also hosts a large population, providing opportunities for military recruitment. Furthermore, it could be used as a starting point for a campaign into the Horn of Africa. Back in the 1870s, the Abyssinian-Egyptian War caused a local power vacuum and European powers swooped in, right? France took a piece of Somaliland, and to counter this, Britain supported Italy, at the time not many years post-unification, and seeking to legitimize their status as a European power by expanding overseas. That is when Italy established settlements in Eritrea and Somaliland, including the strategic deep-water port of Massawa. But still, Abyssinia is the big prize. And there had been tensions between Abyssinia and Eritrea before, as the borders are not what you might call set in stone. Abyssinia itself was a locally powerful expansionist kingdom, wanting to expand northward where Italy's colony was. And this caused several conflicts, like the 1887 Battle of Dogali, where the Abyssinians outnumbered an Italian army of 500 about 14-1, resulting in the annihilation of the Italian force. Italians back home were shocked by the defeat of their troops at the hands of what they saw as an army of inferior Africans. Well, Abyssinia still feared for invasion. France and Russia, though, both opposed to Italy as a colonial power, aided Abyssinia. Russia also because Abyssinia was officially Orthodox Christian. The country became the scene of a European political struggle. Weapons, advisors, and diplomats poured in to win over Emperor Metternich. So it is not much of a surprise that Abyssinia was not to be conquered as many other parts of Africa were. Europeans in general, though, were still full of their own superiority, and the Italians were no different. Italian and Abyssinian military actions escalated the situation, till in the Battle of Adwa in 1896, a massive army of 120,000 Abyssinians crushed an Italian force of 17,000, killing close to half of the Italian and colonial units. If the people back in Italy had been shocked by the loss of 500 Italians, this time Italy is completely stunned. The disaster at Adwa causes a wave of dissatisfaction with the Italian government. Prime Minister Crispi resigns, and Italy resigns from Abyssinia. For the time being, that is. Between 1898 and 1933, Italy focuses its colonial efforts on Eritrea, Somalia, and Libya. As we saw in the episode on the conquest of Libya, this was mostly done by colonial troops, as the Italian public was tired of shedding Italian blood in foreign countries, a feeling only reinforced by the Great War. Now, in this time, Eritrea develops into an African extension of Italy. Post-war, the fascists invest a boatload of money and effort into Eritrea, acknowledging its strategic location on the Red Sea and its industrial potential. 3,600 kilometers of roads are paved, railways constructed, and a long cableway that connects the port of Massawa and the capital of Asmara is constructed. The number of passengers transported by the Eritrean railways is 33,381 in 1910, but increases to 111,463 by 1928. Urbanization is significant as many former agricultural workers moved to the cities to work in factories, leading to the explosive rise of Eritrean cities, Asmara growing from 16,000 inhabitants in 1931 to an astonishing 100,000 by 1940. By the mid-1930s, Eritrea has become the most industrialized part of sub-Saharan Africa. Asmara even has more traffic lights than Rome as a result of modern city planning. These developments give Italy an industrialized, modernized base from which they can and intend to extend their power in Africa. Virtually no regional infrastructure existed in 1896 when the Italians were annihilated at Adwa. So as tensions now again rise with Abyssinia, the Italian-Eritrean base might prove to be decisive. Both Italy and Abyssinia have joined the League of Nations, and though they have been officially at peace since 1896, there are still border disputes, and it is Abyssinia's southeast border with Italian Somaliland that will be the trigger for the next crisis. The Italian fortified garrison at Walwal is one of those disputed border areas. Now, an Anglo-Abyssinian border commission goes in to settle a local border dispute, but the Italians respond by deploying even more troops there. Though opposed to the actions of the Italians, the British withdraw in order to avoid an international incident. The Abyssinians, on the other hand, do not. While it is not completely clear what occurs in December 1934, it is clear that skirmishes break out, resulting in the deaths of dozens of Abyssinians, Italians, and Somalis. In the days following the incident, the Abyssinians accuse Italians of aggression, while the Italians demand an apology and compensation. With neither side backing down, Haile Selassie appeals in person to the League of Nations, hoping to resolve the conflict. They eventually exonerate both sides. In response to Selassie's appeal, Mussolini sends generals Emilio De Bono and Rodolfo Graziani, both of whom served in Libya, to Eritrea and Somaliland with a sizable army in February 1935. The Abyssinians continue to protest the Italian military buildup along their border. Despite attempts to de-escalate the situation, Italo-Abyssinian negotiations collapse. Over the summer of 1935, the British government sends Minister of League of Nations Affairs Anthony Eden to Rome with several proposals, all of which are rejected by Mussolini. In August, a conference takes place in Paris, but Italy firmly holds its position. And what is remarkable is that these talks are held between Italy, France, and Britain, but Abyssinia doesn't really have a say in anything that's going on the international stage. See, Britain and France are primarily interested in maintaining the status quo in Africa and the Mediterranean, keeping the Abyssinian-French-Somali railway open and preventing an Italo-German alliance. But while France and Britain are talking, Italy is still building a force in East Africa in the hundreds of thousands, and it is designed to both avenge Adwa and avoid a repeat. Mussolini sends more troops and more equipment than can possibly be needed or has been requested by his commanders. The Italian forces, they're made up of a multitude of different types of soldiers that can be subdivided into three categories: Italian soldiers, colonial soldiers, and black shirt members. The former two groups are mainly career soldiers, many of whom had experience from years of fighting and who make up the bulk of the force. However, since this conflict is also ideological for the Italians, it also has members of the Black Shirts, the fascist party's armed wing. And on October 3rd, Italy invades Abyssinia, starting the Second Italo-Abyssinian War. The invasion begins with 100,000 Italian and Eritrean soldiers crossing the borders in both north and south. With invasion seemingly inevitable, Selassie had ordered a general mobilization of roughly 500,000 soldiers. However, unlike 1896, Abyssinia is no match for the Italian army. The Abyssinians are ill-equipped, and if they are lucky enough to be issued a rifle, it's probably one dating back to 1900 or even earlier. The Italians, fearing a repeat of Adwa, are overprepared. The numbers of men, supplies, weapons, everything are far above anything necessary to pull off this invasion. Nowhere is this more evident than in the skies, where the Italians have total control. While the Abyssinians have 3 outdated biplanes, the Italians deploy 355 airplanes. This disparity, though, extends to virtually every aspect of the military buildup. Abyssinia has a handful of Fiat World War I era tanks, which were given by Italy after that war, whereas the Italians have 200 modern tanks. The Abyssinians have 200 pieces of antiquated artillery, the Italians 2,000 modern. In other words, Italy has the advantage. And while the Abyssinians manage at times to stall the Italian advance and even attempt a counteroffensive, the ultimate result is predictable. In May 1936, Marshal Pietro Badoglio enters Addis Ababa with Italian and Eritrean troops. Shortly after this, Mussolini gives King Vittorio Emanuele III the title of Emperor and proudly acclaims that Italy has finally reached the status of an empire. It had not been a clean fight, though, and war crimes on both sides were rampant. The most infamous atrocity was Italy's use of chemical weapons, particularly mustard gas, despite having signed the 1925 Geneva Protocol banning that. Italy, of course, denies using chemical weapons, but there is still great international outrage, partly because the Red Cross is also targeted. However, the Abyssinians violated the Hague Convention with their use of dum-dum bullets that explode upon impact and cause severe internal damage. The conquest of Abyssinia marks the effective collapse of the League of Nations as an institution. It formally remains in place for years to come, but the League had failed to prevent one of its member states from attacking another, and that's its core objective. Also, Britain and France had tried to resolve the situation in secret when British Foreign Secretary Samuel Hoare and French Prime Minister Pierre Laval signed the Hoare-Laval Pact. They wanted to carve up Abyssinia, giving Italy territory and increasing its sphere of influence while protecting Abyssinian statehood, albeit as a rump state. However, the revelation of the secret pact results in public outrage in Britain and France against their governments. The plan is scrapped and relations with Mussolini worsen. On the other hand, Mussolini reaches the zenith of his popularity as he manages to expand his country's territory while also avoiding the apparent hypocrisy of France and Britain trying to limit his colonial ambitions. Together with Hitler's enthusiastic support, this means that the lines for the alliances that would take hold in the Second World War are taking form. The Abyssinian invasion also marks Italy's gradual shift towards racist policies. At its core, Italian fascism was not originally based on racism, which set it apart from its German counterpart. However, in the latter half of the 1930s, the government begins instituting official policies such as segregated housing and anti-miscegenation laws. This preserves the status of Italians as a superior people and Italy as a superior state over its colonies. As in Libya, Italy also attempts to court the favor of local disaffected ethnic and religious groups, such as the Oromo and various Muslim groups like the Somalis. Some of these even supported Italy's invasion. The Amhara Orthodox elite are largely removed from power, and the Italians do abolish slavery and feudalism. Italy also carries out large public works projects in the economically backward new colony, which does prove to be a huge strain on the Italian state budget. Hopes for large-scale settlements are unrealized, however, though there is a significant move of Abyssinians to Eritrea since it is more developed than Abyssinia. Under Italian administration, East Africa witnesses large-scale architectural change. Addis Ababa has its biggest mosque built. Asmara becomes a testing ground for a variety of architectural styles, ranging from modernist to Art Deco to futurist to neoclassical. Efforts are made to more integrate the colonies with the Italian economy, such as by establishing the Linea del Impero, the imperial line, a flight route which includes Italy, Libya, and East Africa. However, violence does continue. An Abyssinian insurgency, mainly by royalist loyalists known as the Black Lions, continues to plague the colonizers. The attempted assassination of Rodolfo Graziani, now Viceroy of Italian East Africa in 1937, results in retribution that claims the lives of thousands, particularly the Coptic clergy. In the meantime, Haile Selassie flees to Britain, and Italy gradually attains recognition of its new territory, including by Britain. Though Italy's victory is decisive, it and the guerrilla insurgency that follows does much to exhaust the army's resources, which will take time to replenish, while Mussolini is already eyeing Spain and then the Balkans for possible intervention. Furthermore, the League of Nations' inability to keep Mussolini from annexing Abyssinia shows that they are not capable of anything but making empty threats and gestures. So not only has Italy reignited the colonial conquest of Africa, subjugating peoples far away from the Italian peninsula to create a new empire, they have shown to the world that the League of Nations is, for all practical purposes, nothing but a toothless paper tiger. For the likes of Hitler, Tojo, and Stalin, this is provident news in view of their plans for their neighboring countries. If you'd like to see how the Italians used Abyssinia to launch an attack against the British in the summer of 1940, you can click right here for that, coming up any moment. Our TimeGhost Army member of the week is Torsten. Do like Torsten and join the forces of good. You heard me. So that we can continue to make videos just like this one. You can do that at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. Subscribe, ring that bell, and remember, even the lion must defend himself against flies.